elastic loses its elasticity every time you stitch through it. So I prefer to not stitch through elastic. Secondly, elastics vary as far as recovery and how soft they are. So I think there's a comfort factor, and until you actually have the garment on with the elastic in the garment, you don't know exactly how snug you want that elastic to be. And the other thing is, I do a lot of work for private clients. I have one woman in particular who has me make a lot of things with elastic in her waists. And her elastic in the waist wears out long before the garment does. So the elastic needs to be replaced. So I don't like having the elastic actually stitched to the garment proper. So the way I like to do it is, in this particular case where you're all doing a casing, you're instructed to clean finish. I'm pretending that this is a waist because I don't need to do a whole pant. I'm not going to do these pajamas this way. I'm going to do them a different way anyway, and I'll show you the other way. So this is, I sewed my whole waist. This fits like a little doll, I suppose. And I'm going to clean finish the top. So I stitched. I left an opening, and that's what I want to show you. That's what I like to do. So I clean finished the top, but I left the opening. Do you all see the opening I left? So I stitched the seam, and I backstitched. Right below the opening and right above the opening. And this opening, after you turn this down and clean finish, then this would be stitched down, of course, all the way around. This would be stitched down. And it's also much easier to work with a casing when it's flat. If you're trying to sew elastic on and stretch it and then try to sew it again, you're always having to struggle with the elastic. So look, a casing means this is going to be folded over and elastic will be put inside. This is called a self-casing. That means that it's not a separate piece attached to the top of the garment. So, so now this is going to be stitched down. I didn't stitch it down because I wanted to show you the stitching on the seam. Pick a seam, any seam, a side seam or any seam you want. And then you can go ahead. As I said, it's easier to work with a casing without having to deal with elastic and having it pulled and trying to stretch it out and sew flat. So if you leave this little opening in here, now this is all done, and you can use a pin. You can use a safety pin, and you can fish the elastic through, bring it around. Then you can try it on yourself or try it on whoever you're fitting and make it as snug or as loose as you want. And then you just you overlap. Once you've done that and decided where you want it, you pull the ends out and you overlap and you just do a little box of zigzag stitches to stitch this elastic together. Also, if you have troubles, I use like a 3-inch width or 3.5 and a normal stitch length. Now, also, if you find that you have a trouble with skip stitches on your elastic, then you need to get an elastic needle or a stretch needle, and then you won't have skip stitches. They make them just called stretch needles or lycra needles or whatever. So that keeps you from having skip stitches on your elastic. It also helps on other stretch fabrics too. So that's what I wanted to show you. If you leave a little opening here in the seam, once the elastic is in and this is all gathered together, that opening closes up, it doesn't show. But also, it provides you with the ability to rip that elastic out and sew a new elastic in, put a new elastic in if in fact you need to replace the elastic. So that's how I like to do it if I have to do elastic for somebody. If I'm doing elastic for myself, I like to use, I thought I had 3 of these. Does anybody see another? I want to lose this stuff. Another piece of elastic. Oh, there it is. Okay, I like to use baby elastic, but baby elastic is 1/8 inch wide, or you can use 1/4 inch wide. You can use as wide as you want to. But I like to use multiple elastics instead of one of these, because I think one tends to roll more. I also think one for me, for my body, is not as comfortable. So if I'm doing lingerie, for instance, I'll make a casing about 1.5 inches wide and use a whole bunch of 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch elastics. It makes a softer and nicer finish. But I also always like to work in the flat because it's easier. That's why I told you that if you do this in the flat and then just insert this in after and gather it up all at once, it's just easier than trying to sew sew it on and stretch the fabric flat at the same time. So I'll show you what I like to do. And the only problem with this is you have to, by the way, there's no such thing as non-roll elastic. That's called non-roll elastic, but there's no such thing as non-roll elastic.
This is what I got. Thing that it does where it like kind of rolls inside the garment or folds.
Oh, I hate that. Okay. Now you can't nail it down. So once you stick it in here, you can sew it. You can sew it strategically, like in the different seams.
Okay.
You can do that if you're exactly sure where you want the stretch to be. You know, do you want more gathering in your back or in your front, or where do you want it to be? You can stitch down vertically right through the elastic and right through the seam. You can do that.
So you stick it in there before you do the casing?
No, I sew the whole casing, and then I just fish it through here, bring it out the other end, try it on, decide how tight I want it, and then stitch the elastic together, and then let it go in the opening, and it's done. Okay, that's what I do if I have to do. There are some people who really like that. I prefer this because it's flatter, it doesn't roll, and I'm going to show you what it is.
And I'm sorry. And would this casing also be sewn, or just it's just like a theoretical casing?
No. This would be stitched down. I didn't stitch it because I wanted to show you where I stitched and left the opening.
Okay.
So right now, the next step for this one would be to press it down, the inch or whatever I'm supposed to press it down, and then I would stitch this casing down all the way around. This would all be finished except this little hole. Then I would fish the elastic in it, and that way everything's secure. I would pin the elastic, try it on, say, oh no, that's too tight, loosen the elastic. Okay, that's how I would do that. Does everybody understand that? Okay. So now my preferred way would be, I'm still working in the. You can do this either with an applied, in other words, I could make a separate waistband and apply it to the garment, or you would leave the stitching line open. You would leave the seam allowance open near the top of the garment. And I lay the elastic in right next to the fold line, flat. Yes, it wastes elastic, but I don't really care because it saves my nerves. It's kind of like the dental floss. And then you sew your casing with this elastic perfectly flat. So
you sew through the elastic?
No, right next to the elastic, with the elastic in there. So I'm going to do that. Hopefully I don't have a zigzag going on. That'd be bad. You don't want to sew in the elastic. So you want to leave it next to the fold line. You can use narrow elastic. You can use as many as you want. I just really like it because it's flatter and more comfortable, in my opinion.
So each time you put in a new piece of elastic, you do a new line of stitching.
Exactly. I'm going to do it right now. I'm going to do 3 lines and show you how nice it is. Well, if I allowed for 3 lines. Hopefully I didn't sew through the elastic.
You still have to do this first step first?
No. No, because I've left the whole top of the pants open now. The whole top is open.
So you still want to ideally do your clean finish before you start on.
Well, you press it, fold it under is what you do, but you can't sew it down yet. So now I'm going to go in. I hope I left enough for 3. I'm going to go in and put this right next to the. I'm going to put this right next to the other elastic up here. Make sure it's all snugged up under there really nicely. Are you guys laughing at me?
No, he's laughing at himself.
Okay, so this is this is really nice if you're doing it on the wrists or if you're doing it on your ankles.
Why? You said it's more comfortable, but why is it more comfortable?
I think it's more comfortable because you're not using one big heavy-duty elastic. I like to use softer elastic when I do this, and this doesn't roll because it can't turn. There's no room for it to turn because you're putting the see, when you do this, you have to leave some play so you can fish the elastic in there. But when you do this, you don't have to leave any play. You can just sew it. Okay, so I'm going to do one more.
You could do that same one with a fatter elastic.
Yeah, you could do this, and you could do it thinner, fatter, whatever you want to do. However much, whatever kind of elastic you want to use. Okay, so I'm going to do the third one.
When you adjust it, your body.
I'm going to show you.
Oh, okay.
That's the last thing I'm going to do. Okay. Oh, good. I left enough for 3. Good. Hopefully I didn't sew through anything.
And this is where you turn it under at the bottom?
It's already turned under.
Oh.
Ideally, you'd want to guess so that your final stitching sews the bottom under.
And in theory, that hugs those squishier parts of our body a little nicer.
Yes, it's a lot more comfortable. In my opinion, it's a lot more comfortable. Because you don't have one piece of elastic digging into your soft, mushy parts, you know? Well, it's true.
So it's not so much the fact that you're using thinner elastic, it's because you were saying you could use wider or...
It doesn't matter what kind of elastic. This is technique I'm showing you. But why would you want to put 2 or 3 rows of inch-wide elastic? I mean, who would want to do that?
Okay.
Oh, actually, I was just asking the way you're.
Thinner, not elastic.
If I didn't want to fish the elastic through.
Oh, yeah, you could do this. Like I
Yeah.
say, it wastes elastic. Okay, Dawn, your question. Now I'm done. Okay, I've got 3 rows of elastic in here. So now I'm going to stitch down one side before I do I could even stitch, one side I'm going to stitch down through all layers. And I would probably back stitch. I'd make sure it's really anchored in there. And then, oh man, I want to get rid of all these threads. Okay, and then, so then what you do, providing that you haven't sewn through your elastic, is then you just go to the other side and you pull them all. Okay, and then you can decide how snug or how loose you want it. And then you sew the seam together. See, it wastes elastic. But, and then you're done. You know, that, I like to do this. This really appeals to me.
So you always, it's an open seam?
Yeah, it's flat and open. And then when you get done, you try it on, and then you go in and you sew your seam.
Do you serge the seam right again?
You can.
That does look way nicer.
Well, it's more comfortable.
It looks
I
more
think
comfortable.
it's because it disperses. I just like this a lot. I teach lingerie, and we do this in lingerie because you work with sheer fabrics and you want it around the wrist or around the waist or,
You could just do the channel like the other way too, and then
You absolutely can.
and put it through.
You can. Yeah. Yeah, you could. But this is more snug. See, if you're just fishing this through after, you're gonna have to make these channels a little bit bigger. It's real hard to get it. You have to have some play when you're fishing elastic through, and you don't have to have play like that.
So